The conference chamber aboard Galactic Council Station Omega-7 stretched nearly half a kilometer in diameter. 7 species had built this place together 2,000 years ago. The ceiling arced high above like a cathedral, displaying the spiral arms of the galaxy in real time. Millions of stars glittered against the projected darkness. It was meant to remind everyone who entered of how small they were, how insignificant their problems seemed against the vastness of space. Ambassador Sarah Chen stood at the human delegation platform and felt none of that intended humility. She had been coming to this chamber for 15 years. She knew every political maneuver, every veiled threat dressed up as diplomatic courtesy, every condescending smile from species who believed their age meant wisdom. Today, the condescension had transformed into something uglier. Open hostility council arbiter. Thelen hovered at the center of the chamber, the crystalline being refracted light through its body, casting rainbow patterns across the floor. Its voice resonated like wind chimes in a storm. The matter is settled, Ambassador Chen. Humanity will vacate all colony worlds in the outer rim sectors within 60 standard cycles. This is not a negotiation. This is the will of the Council. Sarah looked at the faces arrayed around the chamber. The Vraxian delegation occupied the largest platform. Empress Zarkthis herself had attended today. Her chitinous body gleamed under the lights. Forearms folded across her thorax. Compound eyes reflected no warmth. No recognition of humanity as equals. Behind her stood 30 warrior drones, each one capable of tearing through steel with their bare claws. It was a statement, a threat made physical. The Telkari sat in their water tanks, tentacles drifting lazily. The Korthans stood like living mountains, stone-skinned and ancient. The Athari delegation maintained their usual eerie silence. All of them watched humanity's response with barely concealed amusement. 60 cycles. They were giving humanity 2 Earth months to abandon 17 colonies. Homes built over 2 centuries. Families who had lived there for generations. 300 million people told to pack up and leave because an ancient empire decided it wanted those worlds back. Sarah took a slow breath. She had prepared for this moment, hoped it would never come, prayed the galaxy would be better than this. She activated her personal communicator with a gesture hidden beneath her podium. A single encoded burst transmitted across human space. The die was cast. No, Sarah said simply. Her voice carried clearly through the chamber's acoustics. We will not abandon our people. We will not surrender our worlds. And we will not accept this council's ruling. The Empress leaned forward. When she spoke, her mandibles clicked together between words. You refuse? You who have been part of this council for barely 2 centuries. You dare defy a ruling supported by 6 of the 7 founding species? I do, Sarah replied. She met the Empress's compound gaze without flinching. And I invite you to do something about it. Silence crashed through the chamber like a physical wave. The Telkari's tentacles went rigid. The Korthan delegation stirred, stone grinding against stone. Arbiter Thelen's crystalline body flashed red. Warning colors, Ambassador, Thelen said carefully. Perhaps you do not understand the gravity of this situation. The Vraxian Empire has provided archaeological evidence of settlements in those sectors, dating back 17,000 years. Their claim predates your species' written history. The Council has ruled. You must comply, Sarah smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. I understand perfectly, Arbiter. You believe might makes right. You believe because your species are older. You can dictate terms to the young upstarts who haven't learned their place yet. She paused. Let the words settle. Well, try me and see what happens, the Empress laughed. The sound was like glass shattering. Harsh and cutting. Bold words from a species that has never fought a real war. You humans play at being civilized. You sign treaties and attend diplomatic functions. You smile and compromise. You are soft. She gestured with one bladed arm. I will show you what happens when children play at being adults. Sarah gathered her datapad, straightened her jacket. Then I suppose we'll all find out together. She turned and walked toward the exit. Her 2 aides fell in beside her. Behind them, the council erupted into chaos, species arguing over humanity's audacity, debating what punishment would be appropriate. As the doors sealed behind them, Junior Ambassador Michael Torres whispered urgently, Ma'am, did you just declare war on the Vraxian Empire? On the council? No, Sarah replied. Her voice was cold, distant. I told them the truth, that humanity will defend itself. They chose to interpret that as a declaration. The signal has been sent. Admiral Webb will have received it by now. And if they attack? Sarah stopped walking, turned to face her aides. Both young. Both brilliant. Both about to see what humanity really was beneath the diplomatic veneer. Then the galaxy learns a lesson we've been trying to spare them for 200 years. That peace is not the same as pacifism. That diplomacy is not cowardice. That humans learned something from our bloody history that they never had to. What lesson is that? Torres asked. How to survive when the monsters come for you. How to become something worse than monsters if necessary. And most importantly, how to choose not to be monsters even when you could be. Sarah resumed walking. The Vraxians are about to discover that choice cuts both ways. 3 days later, the strike came. Not against a military target. The Vraxians wanted to send a message. Wanted humanity to understand the price of defiance. They chose New Perth, an agricultural colony. Population 42,000. The furthest of the contested worlds from any military installation. Sarah watched the footage in Earth Command's Situation Room. Admiral Marcus Webb stood beside her. His face carved from granite, his eyes burning with controlled fury. The Vraxian battle group had emerged from hyperspace directly above the colony. No warning, no demands. They simply opened fire, kinetic strikes from orbit, each one releasing the energy of a nuclear weapon. The colony's shields lasted approximately 4 minutes. After that came the bombardment of the surface. 40,000 civilians dead in the first hour. Another 2,000 in the fires and infrastructure collapse that followed. Children, farmers, teachers, people who had never held a weapon, never threatened anyone. They died because the Vraxian Empire wanted to prove a point. The footage cut to Empress Zarkthis broadcasting from her flagship. This is the price of defiance. This is what happens when lesser species forget their place. Humanity has one more chance. Evacuate the Outer Rim, beg forgiveness, or we will turn every human world into ash and memory. Webb turned off the display. The room fell silent. 20 staff officers, the Joint Chiefs, representatives from every branch of Earth's military, all of them waiting to see how humanity would respond to this atrocity. This casual genocide, Sarah spoke first. Her voice steady despite the rage she felt building behind her ribs. Admiral, status of the Damocles Protocol? All assets confirmed active and in position, Webb replied. We've been preparing for this scenario since first contact. Every contingency planned, every target mapped, every weapon ready. He paused. The question is, do we use them? Once we cross this line, Ambassador, there's no going back. The galaxy will learn what we really are. They killed 40,000 people to make a point, Sarah said quietly. They broadcast it across every civilized world in the galaxy. They want the rest of us to live in fear. To accept that might makes right. That the strong can do whatever they want to the weak. She walked to the window, looked out over the sprawling military complex. Beyond it, the lights of Geneva stretched toward the mountains. Millions of people living their lives, trusting that someone would protect them from the darkness between the stars. Execute the protocol, Sarah said. All of it. Show them exactly what humanity learned from our history. Show them what happens when you mistake peace for weakness, when you think compromise means cowardice, when you assume the quiet ones won't fight back. Webb nodded slowly, a weight settling onto his shoulders. Ma'am, you understand what this means?
What we're about to do?
I do, Sarah replied. It means we stop pretending. We stop holding back. We show the galaxy the truth that we've been hiding for 200 years. That humans didn't join the galactic community because we were weak. We joined because we were terrified of what we might become if we stayed isolated. What we might do if we had no one to check our worst impulses. She turned back to face the room, looked at each officer in turn. The Vraxians wanted to see what happens when they push us, when they attack our civilians, when they threaten everything we've built. So let's show them. Let's show the entire galaxy. Humanity said, try me and see what happens. They tried. Now they get to see. Admiral Webb straightened, saluted. Damocles Protocol is active. All units are weapons-free. God help us all. God help them, Sarah corrected softly. We tried to warn them. We told them to try us and see what happens. They chose this path. Now they walk it to whatever end awaits. Across human space, the changes began immediately. Every human colony went dark. Communications with the galactic network severed. Trade ships recalled to home ports. Embassies sealed. It was as if humanity had suddenly withdrawn from the galaxy entirely, disappeared behind an impenetrable wall. The Galactic Council met in emergency session. Arbiter Thelm tried to establish contact with Earth. No response. They sent messenger ships to human worlds. The ships entered human space and never returned. No distress calls. No wreckage. Just silence. Empress Zarkthus addressed the council with barely contained triumph. You see? They cannot face us. They hide like prey animals. I will personally lead our fleets to cleanse every human world. The Outer Rim will be ours again. The rest of their space will serve as a lesson. Challenge the strong and be erased from history. She assembled the largest Vraxian battle fleet in 3 centuries. 47 capital ships, 300 cruisers, over 2,000 smaller vessels. A force capable of conquering entire star systems. A force that had never known defeat. They entered human space at the world called Haven, an industrial colony with significant orbital infrastructure. The Empress expected resistance, expected human ships to rise and meet them in battle. Instead, they found nothing. Empty space. The colony below still lit up and functioning, but no defensive fleet. No weapons fire, nothing. Cowards, the Empress hissed. They abandoned their own people. Begin bombardment. Show them the price of defiance. That was when the darkness struck. No warning. No energy signature. One moment the Vraxian flagship was coordinating the attack. The next moment it was gone. Not destroyed. Not exploded. Simply vanished. As if it had never existed at all. Panic rippled through the fleet. Ship after ship disappeared. 30 vessels gone in as many seconds. No one could see what was attacking them. Sensors showed nothing. The void between stars reaching out and swallowing them whole. The second in command ordered a retreat. The fleet turned to flee, tried to jump to hyperspace, but something was wrong. The jump drives wouldn't engage. They were trapped, sitting targets for an enemy they couldn't see, couldn't fight, couldn't escape. By the time the slaughter ended, only 3 ships remained. Damaged scout vessels that had been at the edge of the formation. They jumped away carrying news of the disaster. The entire fleet gone, over 200,000 Vraxian warriors. Vanished like mist in sunlight. Back on Earth, Admiral Webb watched the tactical display update. The red icons representing Vraxian ships winked out one by one. Beside him, Dr. Kenji Tanaka stood with his arms crossed. The scientist looked sick, haunted. The Wraith ships performed perfectly, Webb said. Phase displacement technology worked exactly as designed. They never even saw what killed them. I know, Tanaka replied quietly. I designed them. Spent 20 years perfecting quantum displacement fields. Ships that exist slightly out of phase with normal spacetime, invisible, untouchable. Perfect killers. He paused. I thought we'd never actually use them. That just having them would be enough of a deterrent. Webb placed a hand on the scientist's shoulder. They killed 40,000 civilians, Doctor. They broadcast it as entertainment. As a warning. They promised to do worse. To burn every human world to ash. What would you have us do? Surrender? Let them genocide our species because violence makes you uncomfortable? No, Tanaka admitted. But that doesn't make it any easier to watch. To know what we're capable of. What we've unleashed. Then let that weight remind you why we exist, Webb said. Why humanity built weapons that terrify us. We remember what happens when good people refuse to fight evil. We learned that lesson in blood and ash across our entire history. Never again. That's what this is. That's what we are, the monsters who learned to be better, but never forgot how to be monsters when necessary. News of the defeat reached the Galactic Council within hours. The carefully crafted image of Vraxian invincibility shattered. Questions flooded the diplomatic channels. How had humanity done this? What weapons did they possess? Why had no one known about this capability? Ambassador Chen finally broke her silence. Her message broadcast across every civilized world in the galaxy. She appeared on screen dressed in formal diplomatic attire. Behind her, the flags of Earth and all its colonies stood in silent witness. To the peoples of the galaxy, she began. For 200 years, humanity has walked softly among you. We have compromised, negotiated, accepted judgments we disagreed with because we valued peace above pride. We joined the galactic community because we wanted to be better than our history. We wanted to believe that civilization meant something. That law and justice could replace the brutality of might makes right. She paused. Let the weight of those words settle. The Vraxian Empire destroyed that hope. They murdered 40,000 civilians to prove their strength, to remind us of our place. They promised worse, threatened to exterminate our entire species unless we submitted to their will. They believed we were weak. That peace meant we couldn't fight, that our willingness to compromise proved we had nothing to compromise with. Her expression hardened. They were wrong. We told them. Try me and see what happens. They tried. Now they see. Humanity is not weak. We are restrained. We are not helpless. We are choosing peace while capable of war. That choice is the only thing that has kept the galaxy safe from us, from what we can do when pushed to the edge. The transmission ended. Silence fell across the galactic networks, and in that silence everyone began to understand the same terrifying truth. Humanity had been hiding something. Not weakness. Not inability. They had been hiding strength. Terrible, overwhelming strength. The kind that only a species that had nearly destroyed itself multiple times could develop and choose not to use. Until now. Until someone pushed them too far. Until someone made them show the galaxy what they really were beneath all that carefully maintained civilization. The Vraxians had poked the sleeping beast. Now everyone was about to learn what that beast looked like when it opened its eyes and remembered how to hunt. The smoking ruins of New Perth still smoldered when humanity's true nature began to reveal itself. Admiral Marcus Webb stood on the bridge of the EDS Retribution, watching the tactical displays update in real time. Every human world showed green, fully operational. Every defensive platform active. Every orbital installation armed and ready. But to the galaxy, humanity had gone silent. Dark. Vanished behind walls of encrypted communications that no one could break. Webb studied the star charts. 200 years of careful exploration, detailed surveys of every major trade route, positions of every species' military installation, supply depots, manufacturing centers, command and control networks. The Galactic Council thought humans were enthusiastic traders, eager explorers, friendly neighbors always willing to share resources and information. They were intelligence agents. Every single one. 2 centuries of the most comprehensive reconnaissance operation in galactic history. Humanity had been preparing for this possibility since the day they made first contact. Since the moment they realized the galaxy was not the peaceful utopia they had hoped for, that strength still mattered. That the strong still preyed on the weak. Status of Operation Silent Night? Webb asked his tactical officer. Commander Sarah Rodriguez checked her displays. All sleeper fleets report ready status. 47 systems. Each one positioned near critical Vraxian infrastructure. They've been waiting in those positions for an average of 32 years. Crews rotate every 18 months. No one suspected a thing. Webb nodded slowly. 32 years. An entire generation of human warriors living in deep space, hidden in the dark between stars, waiting for orders that might never come. That was humanity. Patient, methodical, willing to play the long game because they understood something the galaxy had forgotten. That preparation prevented catastrophe. That the best defense was the enemy never knowing you were ready to fight. What about our friends on the Council? Webb asked. The species that voted with the Vraxians to steal our worlds? Rodriguez allowed herself a cold smile. We have files on every council member going back 15 decades. Political connections, economic interests, military capabilities, psychological profiles, everything. If this escalates beyond the Vraxians, we know exactly where to apply pressure. Economic sanctions that would cripple their trade networks. Intelligence we could leak that would destabilize their governments. Military strikes that would cripple their defensive capabilities without killing civilians. She paused. We also have contingencies if they decide to join the fight against us. Each species has different weaknesses, different fears. We've spent 200 years learning them all. Webb walked to the forward viewport. Stars stretched in every direction. Beautiful, distant, cold. Somewhere out there, the Vraxian Empire was realizing they had made a terrible mistake. That humanity's silence was not surrender. It was preparation. The calm before a storm that would reshape the entire political structure of known space. A memory surfaced. Webb pushed it down. Now was not the time. But the faces haunted him anyway. His wife, his daughter, killed during what the galaxy called the First Contact Incident, what humanity called the First Contact War. An exploratory fleet from the Corthons had discovered Earth. Humanity had been excited, hopeful, ready to join a community of peaceful species, exploring the cosmos together. The Corthons had seen primitive technology, a species barely capable of interstellar flight. They had landed on Earth and demanded submission. When humanity refused, they bombarded 3 cities from orbit. 2 million dead in the opening salvo. They wanted slaves, resources, a species that would serve their empire without question. They discovered their mistake within days. Humanity was not advanced in space travel, but they were very advanced in killing each other. Thousands of years of constant warfare, weapons development that had nearly led to extinction multiple times. When the Korthans landed their occupation forces, they met resistance that shocked them. Humans using chemical weapons, biological agents, nuclear devices deployed in their own cities to stop the invaders. The Korthans fled, went to the Galactic Council claiming humans were savages, monsters that needed to be contained. The Council sent mediators, tried to understand what had happened. They found a species traumatized but defiant, a species that had lost millions but refused to surrender, a species that had looked at superior technology and found ways to defeat it anyway. The Council offered membership, promised protection from future aggression, but Webb remembered what the senior ambassadors had told him. The Council's real message had been clear. Join us or we will allow others to finish what the Korthans started. Be civilized or be destroyed. Humanity had chosen to join, to learn. To prepare, sir. Rodriguez interrupted his thoughts. We have reports from the Vraxian border. Their second fleet is moving toward human space. Smaller than the first, only 12,000 ships. Looks like a probe to test our defenses. Webb turned back to the displays. Let them come. They'll learn the same lesson. Send orders to the Wraith fleet. Engage at maximum effective range. No survivors. No warnings. I want that fleet erased from existence before they get within a light year of any human colony. Sir, Rodriguez said carefully, that's 12,000 ships. Even Wraith ships need time to target and engage. Some will escape. They'll report back what they saw. How we fight? Good, Webb replied. Let them see. Let them understand that we have weapons they cannot counter. Technology they didn't know existed. Let them realize that every assumption they made about humanity was wrong. Fear is a weapon too, Commander. Sometimes the best way to end a war is to make the enemy too terrified to continue fighting. The orders went out. Across 47 star systems, human forces began to move. Not toward battle, toward positions of advantage. Supply lines, manufacturing centers, the infrastructure that kept the Vraxian military machine running. Humanity had spent 200 years studying warfare throughout history. Every great military commander, every successful strategy, they had learned from Sun Tzu and Clausewitz and von Moltke, from ancient generals and modern theorists. The lesson was always the same. Wars were not won by destroying armies. They were won by destroying the enemy's ability to field armies, by breaking their will to fight, by making victory impossible and defeat inevitable. The Vraxians wanted to fight a conventional war. Ship against ship, fleet against fleet. They would never get that chance. In the Vraxian home system, Empress Zarkthus convened her war council. The loss of the First Fleet had shocked her, angered her. But she was not afraid, not yet. She had resources the humans could not match. Thousands of systems, trillions of subjects, manufacturing capacity that dwarfed anything humanity possessed. The Second Fleet will locate their invisible ships, she declared. We will adapt. Deploy sensor grids that can detect phase variations, mass drivers that saturate entire areas of space. They cannot hide from everything. Once we find their trick, we will crush them. Her chief military advisor clicked his mandibles nervously. Empress, perhaps we should open negotiations. The humans have proven more dangerous than anticipated. We could reach a compromise. Allow them to keep most of their colonies in exchange for tribute and vassalage. The Empress struck him with one bladed forearm. He crashed to the floor, heightened, cracked, and leaking fluid. Negotiate with prey? Never. The Vraxian Empire has ruled for 17,000 years because we do not compromise. We do not negotiate. We take what we want and destroy anyone who opposes us. The humans will learn this lesson, even if I must burn every one of their worlds to teach it. News of the Second Fleet's approach reached Earth within hours. Dr. Kenji Tanaka sat in his laboratory, staring at holographic displays of weapons he had designed. Terrible weapons. Things that should never have been created. But he had created them anyway because someone had to. Because if humanity did not have these tools when they needed them, they would be at the mercy of species that felt no mercy. His assistant entered quietly. Dr. Admiral Webb is asking about the Pandora arsenal. He wants to know if we should prepare additional systems for deployment. Tanaka closed his eyes. The Pandora arsenal, weapons so dangerous that even showing them to the galaxy would change everything, make humanity a target, force other species to build equivalent horrors just to maintain balance. He had hoped those weapons would never leave the hidden facilities where they were stored, that the Wraith ships and other conventional military technology would be sufficient. Not yet, he said finally. The Wraith should be sufficient for now. But prepare the launch codes. If the Varaxians escalate further, if other species join them, we may need everything. And God help us all if we do. What's in the Pandora arsenal? His assistant asked. She was young, brilliant, had been with his team for only 6 months. She did not have full clearance yet. Tanaka looked at her, saw innocence about to be shattered, things that should never exist. Reality-severing munitions that can cut ships out of space-time entirely, biological agents tailored to target specific species' genetic markers, AI-guided swarm systems that learn and adapt faster than any living commander, weapons that would make the galaxy fear us so much they would unite just to destroy us. He stood, walked to the window overlooking Tokyo. Millions of lights. Millions of people. We built them because we had to. Because our history taught us that the only thing worse than having terrible weapons is not having them when your enemy does. But using them, that crosses a line we can never step back over. That makes us the monsters we've spent 200 years proving we're not. The second Varaxian fleet entered human space near the colony world of Sanctum. 12,000 ships in tight formation, sensor grids active, mass drivers charged and ready. They had learned from the first fleet's mistakes. This time they would be ready for the invisible attackers. The Wraith ship struck from a different angle. Not from empty space. From behind the colony's moon. From within the orbital infrastructure they assumed was abandoned. Phase displacement let them exist in normal space and shifted space simultaneously. They appeared for microseconds, just long enough to fire, then vanished again before return fire could target them. The Varaxian fleet lasted longer than the first. Nearly 10 minutes of sustained combat. Their commanders adapted quickly, coordinated their fire, managed to destroy 3 Wraith ships through sheer volume of covering fire. But it was not enough. It could never be enough. For every Wraith ship destroyed, 100 Varaxian vessels were eliminated. When the battle ended, 200 Varaxian ships managed to escape, enough to report back, enough to carry news of the slaughter, but also enough to confirm what the Empress feared. Human technology was superior, their tactics flawless, their intelligence about Varaxian operations comprehensive. Somehow, impossibly, the young species had outplanned and outprepared an empire that had endured for millennia. On the Galactic Council station, emergency meetings continued around the clock. Representatives from 6 species argued about how to respond. The Telkari advocated for intervention, a joint military force to stop the human aggression. The Korthans, remembering their own defeat, stayed silent. The Yathari proposed sanctions, economic isolation until humanity agreed to negotiate. Arbiter Thelen called for calm. We must understand what we are dealing with. Humanity has revealed military capabilities we did not know existed, technology that should not be possible for such a young species. This suggests they have been preparing for conflict since they joined the Council. Perhaps before. A Telkari representative spoke. Then they deceived us. Lied about their capabilities, pretended to be peaceful while building weapons to threaten us all. This is exactly the kind of behavior we should punish. Unite our forces, show them they cannot threaten the established order. Or, a Korthan elder rumbled, we could consider why they built such capabilities and never used them until provoked. 200 years of peaceful coexistence. No military conflicts. No territorial expansion. They integrated into our society, traded freely, contributed to scientific advancement. Then we voted to take their colonies. The Varaxians murdered 40,000 civilians. Perhaps the question is not why humanity is fighting back. Perhaps the question is why we thought they would not. Silence fell. The Korthan had spoken an uncomfortable truth. Humanity had followed every rule, accepted every judgment. Then the Council changed the rules, allowed theft and murder, and now they were shocked that humanity refused to accept it. Refused to be victims quietly. Ambassador Chen's second message arrived during the debate. This time she appeared on screen wearing military dress uniform, not diplomatic attire. The shift was deliberate, symbolic. Humanity was done pretending. To the members of the Galactic Council, she began, Some of you are debating whether to join the Vraxian Empire in their war against us. Some of you think you can force us to submit through economic sanctions or diplomatic isolation. Some of you believe you can teach us our place through military force. Allow me to educate you about what you are actually considering. The screen behind her lit up with data, star charts, trade routes, military installations, the layout of every major species infrastructure in perfect detail. This is what we know about you. Everything. 200 years of careful observation. Every weakness, every vulnerability, every secret you thought was hidden. We have watched you, learned from you, prepared for you. Her expression hardened. We did not do this because we planned to conquer you. We did this because our history taught us a simple lesson. Hope for peace, but prepare for war. We hoped the galaxy would be better than our experience suggested. That law would matter more than strength. That civilization would mean something. You have proven those hopes were naive. So now you get to see what happens when humanity stops hoping and starts acting. She leaned forward. Any species that joins the Vraxians in attacking us will regret that choice. We will not fight fair. We will not accept honorable defeat. We will use every advantage, every weapon, every tactic we have developed across our bloody history. And our history is very, very bloody. We nearly destroyed ourselves a dozen times before we reached the stars. We learned how to kill efficiently, how to wage total war, how to make our enemies regret ever challenging us. Those lessons are about to be taught to the galaxy. The transmission ended, but the message was clear. Humanity was not asking for peace. They were demanding it. Choose peace or face consequences no one was prepared for. Because humanity had stopped pretending, stopped hiding. The galaxy was about to learn what humans really were when they decided the time for diplomacy had ended. Webb watched the transmission from his bridge. Saw the calculated escalation. The precise threat delivered with cold professionalism. Sarah Chen was not just a diplomat anymore. She was a warrior in different uniform. Fighting with words instead of weapons, but fighting nonetheless. Do you think it will work? Rodriguez asked. Will they back down? Webb shook his head. Some will. The smart ones. The ones who can read between the lines and understand what we're really saying. But others, the ones who think we're bluffing, the ones who believe their strength still matters, they'll test us, and when they do, we'll have to show them we meant every word. He looked at the tactical displays again. Vraxian forces regrouping. Council members moving fleets into position. The galaxy holding its breath to see what would happen next. Tell all commanders to maintain readiness. The next phase is about to begin, and it's going to get much worse before it gets better. Worse how, sir? Webb's expression was grim. Because now they know we have advanced weapons. They know we've been hiding our capabilities. But they don't know everything. They don't know about the Pandora arsenal. They don't know about the contingencies we have for total war. They don't know that every weapon we've shown them so far is just the opening move. We tried to warn them. We said, try me and see what happens. They tried. Now we have to show them, all of it, until they understand that fighting humanity is not worth any prize they think they'll win. Rodriguez felt cold settle into her bones. She had seen the classified files, knew what weapons humanity had prepared for doomsday scenarios. If those were deployed, if humanity revealed the full extent of what they were capable of, the galaxy would never be the same. Terror would replace respect. Fear would replace friendship. But maybe that was the price of survival. Maybe that was what humanity had to become to protect themselves. Orders confirmed, sir, she said quietly. All forces standing by for Phase 2 operations. The galaxy is about to learn what humanity means by total war. Webb nodded, looked out at the stars. Somewhere his wife and daughter rested, victims of the galaxy's casual cruelty. He fought for them, for every human who had died because others thought humans were weak, were prey, were expendable. Never again. That was the promise. The oath every human commander had taken. Whatever it cost, whatever it took. Never again would humanity be victims, not while they still had breath to fight and weapons to deploy. The galaxy would learn that lesson, one way or another. They would learn. The Vraxian Empire's third response was not another fleet. Empress Zarkthus had learned that lesson at terrible cost. Instead, she authorized strikes against human supply lines, hit-and-run attacks by small squadrons targeting merchant vessels and automated cargo platforms. If she could not defeat human warships, she would starve their colonies, force them to spread their forces thin, protecting civilian infrastructure. make them bleed resources until they had no choice but to negotiate. The strategy lasted 6 days. Then the Vraxian supply network began to collapse. Fusion plants suffered mysterious malfunctions. Orbital manufacturing facilities lost power. Transport ships disappeared between systems. At first, the Empress thought it was random chance. Equipment failure across an empire spanning thousands of worlds. Then the pattern became clear. Every facility that supplied the military, every depot that stored weapons, every shipyard building warships, all of them failing simultaneously. Captain Alexandra Nova Reeves stood in the shadows of a Vraxian ammunition factory on the industrial world of Krath 9. Her suit bent light around her body, made her invisible to both visual sensors and thermal imaging. Behind her, 5 members of her special operations team worked quickly, placing shaped charges on key structural supports, programming them to detonate in sequence. Maximum damage, minimum warning. This was the 14th facility they had sabotaged in 3 days. Human special forces had infiltrated 19 Vraxian systems, operating deep behind enemy lines, striking at the infrastructure that kept the military machine running, not the glorious battles of fleet combat. This was war at its most basic, destroying the enemy's ability to fight before they even reached the battlefield. Charges set? Her demolitions expert reported quietly. This facility produces 60% of their antimatter containment units. Without it, their capital ships cannot refuel. Estimated impact on fleet operations is catastrophic within 4 weeks. Nova nodded, checked her tactical display. 30 kilometers away, another team was sabotaging the power distribution network. When both strikes hit simultaneously, the factory would lose containment on its antimatter reserves. The resulting explosion would look like an industrial accident. Just one more failure in a supply network that was mysteriously falling apart. Exfiltrate on my mark, Nova ordered. 3, 2, 1 mark. The team moved as one. Ghosts in the darkness. By the time Vraxian security realized something was wrong, they would be light years away, already planning their next strike. Humanity had learned guerrilla warfare over centuries of conflict, had perfected asymmetric tactics through countless insurgencies and counterinsurgencies. Now those lessons were being applied on an interstellar scale. On the Vraxian throne world of Zarkath Prime, the Empress raged. Her war council cowered before her fury. How are they doing this? How are humans infiltrating our most secure facilities? We have the best sensors in the galaxy, military-grade security, genetic scanners that should detect any non-Vraxian organism. Yet somehow these primates are sabotaging critical infrastructure across 19 systems. Her chief intelligence officer spoke carefully. Empress, we are dealing with capabilities we did not know existed. Stealth technology beyond our current understanding. Perhaps chemical or biological agents programmed to cause systemic failures. Or they have agents embedded in our society. Sleeper cells activated for this operation. Find them, the Empress hissed. Whatever it costs. Tear apart every facility. Interrogate every worker. I want these humans found and eliminated. And I want to know how they learned so much about our infrastructure. Someone has been feeding them intelligence for years. Decades, perhaps. Find that leak and seal it. But it was too late. The damage was done. The Vraxian military machine depended on a complex web of logistics. Remove key nodes and the entire system began to collapse. Fleets could not refuel. Repair facilities lacked parts. New construction halted. And all of it happened too fast to respond effectively. By the time they identified one compromised facility, 3 more had failed. The Galactic Council watched these developments with growing alarm. Ambassador Chen's warning had been clear. Any species that joined the Vraxians would face similar treatment. The Telkari, confident in their own security, announced they would send military aid to the Empire, a gesture of solidarity among the older species, a message to humanity that they could not challenge the established order. Within 24 hours of that announcement, the Telkari home system experienced a cascading failure of its orbital defense network. Automated platforms turned on each other, self-destructed. The Telkari military scrambled to regain control, found their command codes had been changed, override protocols disabled. Someone had taken control of their entire defensive infrastructure, made it useless, left them vulnerable, and then the platforms were released. Controls returned to normal. No permanent damage, just a demonstration. A message from humanity that said we can reach you whenever we want. Your defenses mean nothing. Choose wisely. The Telkari withdrew their offer of military aid, announced they would remain neutral, focus on diplomatic solutions. The message was received by every species on the Council. Humanity was not bluffing. They had the capability to strike anyone, anywhere, and they were willing to do it. On Earth, Dr. Tanaka reviewed the intelligence reports. The cyber attacks on the Telkari had worked perfectly. 200 years of embedding backdoors in galactic technology, human engineers working on defensive systems across dozens of species, always helpful, always contributing expertise, and always leaving ways to access those systems remotely if necessary. How many species have we compromised like this? His assistant asked. She was learning the full scope of humanity's preparations now, each revelation more shocking than the last. All of them, Tanaka replied simply. Every major council species. Some of the minor ones too. We did not plan to use these backdoors. They were insurance, deterrence, the ultimate guarantee that if anyone came for us, we could hurt them back, make aggression too costly to contemplate. That is terrifying, she said. We have been violating the sovereignty of every species we call allies for 2 centuries. If they knew, if they found out what we had done, they would see it as the ultimate betrayal. Yes, Tanaka agreed. But would you rather we had not prepared? Would you prefer we trusted everyone to be peaceful, to respect our rights, to not take advantage of our youth and relative weakness? He gestured to the displays showing New Perth, the 40,000 dead. They murdered our civilians to make a political point, killed children to prove their strength, and the Council approved it, supported it. Only our preparations have prevented worse. His assistant had no response. The logic was brutal but clear. Humanity had prepared for treachery because treachery was real, had built weapons because weapons worked, had compromised their principles because the alternative was extinction. It was not glorious, not noble, but it was survival. The Empress called an emergency summit, invited representatives from 6 council species to Zarkath Prime, proposed a joint military action against humanity, a coordinated strike that would overwhelm even their advanced defenses, unity against the threat, the old order restoring itself through force. 3 species agreed. The Korthan declined. The Yathari and their usual enigmatic silence suggested refusal. The Telkari sent regrets, but 3 species backing the Vraxians was enough. The Rethkin Confederacy, the Irani Collective, the Sulari Federation. Together with the Vraxian Empire, they could field a force of over 100,000 ships. Surely enough to crush human resistance, to teach the young species their place, to restore order. Admiral Webb received the intelligence within hours. His face remained impassive as he read the details. 4 species, 100,000 ships, the largest military coalition in galactic history, all of it aimed at humanity, at destroying everything humans had built, at making them submit or die. Order, sir? Rodriguez asked quietly. Webb looked at the tactical displays, watched the red icons representing enemy forces begin to move. Convergence points identified, supply lines mapped. They thought numbers would win this war, thought quantity could overcome quality. They were about to learn the most important lesson humanity had to teach, that wars were not won by the side with more ships. They were won by the side willing to do whatever was necessary to survive. Contact Dr. Tanaka, Webb said. Tell him to begin Phase 3, full deployment of the Pandora arsenal. All contingencies authorized. We gave them every chance to stop. Every warning. They chose this. Now they live with the consequences. Rodriguez felt her breath catch. Phase 3, the Doomsday Protocols. Weapons that would change warfare forever. Make humanity's earlier strikes look like gentle warnings. Sir, once we deploy those systems, there is no going back. Every species will know what we are capable of. They will fear us for generations. Good, Webb replied. Let them fear. Fear prevents war. Fear makes species think twice before attacking their neighbors. We tried being friendly, tried being diplomatic, tried being the good neighbors who played by the rules. Look where it got us. 40,000 dead, 4 species united to exterminate us. Maybe it is time the galaxy learned to fear humanity, to understand that peace is not our only option, that we can be peaceful or we can be powerful, and we are choosing both from now on. The orders went out. Across human space, weapon systems activated that had never been tested in combat. Technology so advanced it seemed impossible. Munitions so destructive they violated every treaty humanity had signed. But treaties only mattered when all parties honored them. When some broke the rules while others followed them, the rules became chains. Humanity was done wearing chains. The first deployment was reality-severing torpedoes, warheads that did not explode. Instead, they cut holes in space-time itself, created zones where physics stopped working normally. Ships caught in those zones did not die. They ceased to exist, removed from reality entirely. No wreckage, no radiation, just empty space where moments before a ship had been. The coalition fleet gathered at a staging area in neutral space. 100,000 ships in formation, commanders coordinating their attack, planning their routes, celebrating the inevitable victory over the upstart humans. They would strike in 3 waves. Overwhelming force, decisive action. Humanity's colonies would fall within weeks, their home system within months. The first reality-severing torpedo arrived without warning, launched from so far away that no sensor could detect it until impact. It struck the center of the Rethkin formation. 2,000 ships vanished in an instant. One moment they were there, the next moment nothing, as if they had never existed. The reality wound closed behind them, sealed, permanent. Panic erupted across the fleet. Commanders screaming for information, trying to understand what had just happened. Sensors showing impossible readings, space-time fluctuations that should not be possible. Before they could react, 3 more torpedoes struck. 3 more sections of the fleet erased from existence. Thousands more ships. Hundreds of thousands of lives. Gone, just gone. The coalition fleet broke formation, scattered, tried to flee. But humanity had planned for this moment, had spent decades developing these weapons, knew exactly how to deploy them for maximum psychological impact. 8 more torpedoes followed. Not aimed at clusters, aimed at flagships, command vessels, the ships carrying admirals and generals, the leaders who had agreed to genocide humanity. When the strike ended, 97,000 ships remained of the 100,000 that had gathered. 3,000 erased completely, the remaining forces in complete disarray. No coordination, no command structure, just terrified crews trying to escape whatever had attacked them, trying to flee back to their home systems, to safety that did not exist anymore, because humanity had already deployed the second weapon system. Biological agents tailored to each species' specific genetic markers. Microscopic machines released into the supply chains months ago. Dormant, waiting, now activated by encrypted signals. They did not kill. That would be too obvious. Instead, they caused illness, weakness, symptoms that looked like random disease. Commanders fell ill. Pilots collapsed. Entire crews became too sick to operate their ships effectively. The coalition's offensive collapsed before it could begin. Ships limped back to port. Crews quarantined. Medical facilities overwhelmed. And across 4 empires, populations began to panic. If humans could strike at their military so easily, what protected civilians? If humans had biological weapons, what else did they have? How deep did human infiltration go? How long had they been preparing for this war? Ambassador Chen broadcast her 3rd message. This time there was no uniform. She wore simple civilian clothing, stood in what appeared to be her home. The message was personal, direct, human. You formed a coalition to exterminate us, she said quietly. Gathered the largest military force in history to destroy a species that only wanted peace. We stopped you. Not with superior numbers, not with ancient lineage or righteous cause. We stopped you with weapons you did not know existed, technology you cannot counter, capabilities you did not believe possible. She paused. Let the words sink in. We did this without deploying our most devastating weapons. The biological agent making your crew sick? It is temporary. They will recover completely within weeks. The reality-severing torpedoes? We used 12. We have thousands, and those are not even the worst things we built. Not even close. We have weapons that would terrify you so much you would unite every species in the galaxy just to destroy us. We have not used them. Yet. Because we remember something you seem to have forgotten. That power without restraint is not strength. It is tyranny. And we refuse to become tyrants, her expression hardened. But make no mistake. If you force our hand further, we will deploy everything. We will show you exactly what a species that survived its own worst impulses multiple times can do, when survival requires it. We will make you wish you had listened when we said try me and see what happens. Because you tried, and this is only the beginning of what happens. Choose peace now, While that choice still exists, while we are still willing to offer it, the transmission ended. Silence fell across the galaxy. Species that had existed for millennia suddenly understood they were not the apex, not the strongest, not the most advanced. They had been surpassed by the young species they had dismissed as irrelevant. The species they had thought they could bully, control, destroy if necessary. They had been wrong. Catastrophically wrong, and now they had to decide whether pride was worth extinction. On Zarkath Prime, Empress Zarkthis finally felt fear. Real fear. Not the cautious concern of facing a worthy opponent. True terror at confronting something she could not defeat, could not escape, could not comprehend. The humans had held back, had warned repeatedly, had given chances. She had ignored them all, believed her ancient empire was invincible. Now she understood the truth. Her empire was fragile, had always been fragile, and humanity had been patient enough to see every weakness, clever enough to exploit them all. She looked at her remaining advisors, saw the same fear reflected in their eyes. "What do we do?" she asked. For the first time in 4 centuries of rule, she genuinely did not know, did not have answers. "How do we fight an enemy like this?" Her chief advisor spoke carefully. "Empress, perhaps the question is not how to fight them. Perhaps the question is whether we should continue fighting them at all. They have demonstrated overwhelming superiority, shown they can strike anywhere, defeat any force we send, and they claim they have held back, that worse weapons exist. If they are telling the truth, if they deploy those weapons, our empire may not survive. The cost of victory, if victory is even possible, may be extinction." The Empress wanted to rage, to demand total war, to throw everything at humanity until one side was destroyed. But fear paralyzed that instinct. Fear of what humanity might do if truly pushed to the edge. Fear that the humans were not bluffing, that they really did have weapons worse than reality-severing torpedoes. That fighting them further would only prove how right they were to prepare so thoroughly, so ruthlessly, so completely. "Contact the human ambassador," she said finally. The words tasted like ash, like defeat. But survival mattered more than pride. "Tell them we wish to negotiate, that the Vraxian Empire is willing to discuss terms for ending hostilities, that we recognize we misjudged humanity's capabilities and willingness to defend themselves." She paused, felt 17,000 years of imperial pride crumble. "Tell them we surrender." The surrender offer arrived through encrypted channels. Empress Zarkthis herself appeared on screen. No throne room grandeur, no warrior drone standing guard. Just an old creature looking suddenly fragile. Defeated. The weight of 17 millennia of imperial pride crushed by 3 weeks of warfare against an enemy she had fatally underestimated. "Ambassador." Chen watched the transmission in the secure conference room deep beneath Geneva. Admiral Webb stood beside her. Dr. Tanaka sat at the table, hands folded, expression haunted. They had won. Achieved what seemed impossible 3 weeks ago. Forced the largest empire in the galaxy to surrender, without deploying even half of humanity's arsenal. But victory felt hollow, bitter, because the galaxy would never see them the same way again. "What are your terms?" the Empress asked. Her voice carried none of its earlier arrogance, just exhaustion, fear. The realization that her empire had survived only because humans chose to let it survive. "What does humanity demand for peace?" Chen looked at her advisors. They had discussed this moment, planned for it, hoped it would come before they had to reveal weapons that would make reality-severing torpedoes look gentle, before they had to deploy systems so terrible that Dr. Tanaka had wept when designing them, before they became the monsters they had spent 2 centuries proving they were not. "First," Chen said, "full recognition of human sovereignty over all colony worlds. No future challenges to our territorial claims. No archaeological justifications for seizure. What is ours remains ours. Second, reparations for New Perth. 40,000 civilians murdered. That debt must be acknowledged and paid. Third, trials for those who ordered the attack. War crimes are war crimes regardless of who commits them or which species they belong to." She paused. "Let those demands register. Fourth, the complete dissolution of the current Galactic Council structure. It has proven itself unable to provide justice, unable to protect the weak from the strong. A new organization will be formed, one with actual enforcement mechanisms, actual accountability, where law matters more than age or military strength." The Empress flinched. You ask us to destroy the political structure that has maintained order for 3,000 years. To admit that our entire system was unjust, that we were wrong. Yes, Chen replied simply. Because it was. Your order was built on might makes right, on the assumption that older species had the right to dictate terms to younger ones. That military strength justified any action. You voted to steal our worlds because you could. Murdered our civilians because you thought we would not fight back. That system died the moment we proved we could fight. That we would fight. Now something better must replace it. The transmission ended with the Empress agreeing to consider the terms, to present them to her advisors, to respond within 72 hours. But everyone in the room knew the truth. She would accept, had no choice but to accept, because the alternative was complete destruction, and she had finally learned that humanity was capable of delivering that destruction, would deliver it if forced to. Webb turned to Chen. You realize what you just did? Demanding the council dissolve? Half the galaxy will see that as a power grab, as humanity trying to dominate everyone else. We will make enemies of species that would have stayed neutral. Good, Chen replied. Her voice was steel. Let them be enemies if they want to preserve a corrupt system. Let them fight us if they think injustice is worth dying for. We tried working within their system for 200 years. Followed their rules. Accepted their judgments. Where did it get us? 40,000 dead. 4 empires united to exterminate us. The council proved it cannot be reformed. It must be replaced. And if that makes us conquerors in their eyes, then so be it. At least we will be honest conquerors, not pretending law matters while letting the strong prey on the weak. Tanaka spoke quietly. There is another problem. The weapons we deployed. The capabilities we revealed. Every species will be terrified of us now. They will unite to develop countermeasures. Build their own doomsday arsenals. We may have just triggered an arms race that ends with the galaxy destroying itself. Then we make sure the new system has teeth, Chen said. Real enforcement. Real consequences for aggression. And we offer to share our technology. Not the weapons. Never the weapons. But the defensive systems. The detection grids. The countermeasures. We prove that we built these capabilities for survival, not conquest. That we are willing to help others defend themselves. That changes the narrative from us versus them to us helping everyone survive together. Webb shook his head, naive. Species do not trust those who have power over them. They fear them, resent them. We just proved we can destroy any of them whenever we want. You think sharing defensive technology will make them grateful? It will make them desperate to find ways to hurt us back, to restore the balance. Maybe, Chen admitted. But what is the alternative? Rule through fear? Become the empire we just defeated? I refuse to accept that humanity survived this war only to become what we fought against. We will find a better way, even if it costs us, even if it makes us vulnerable. Because the moment we decide that fear is sufficient, the moment we give up on justice and law, we prove the Vraxians were right about us, that we are savages, monsters pretending to be civilized. The debate continued for hours. Eventually, they agreed on the final terms. Accountability for war crimes, territorial recognition, economic reparations, and a new governing structure with humanity as guarantors but not rulers. It was compromise, messy, imperfect, but better than the alternatives. Better than genocide, better than eternal warfare, better than becoming the tyrants the galaxy now feared they might be. Captain Nova Reeves and her team were recalled from behind enemy lines. They gathered in a briefing room on Earth. 23 operators who had spent 3 weeks sabotaging critical infrastructure across 19 star systems. They looked exhausted, haunted. The weight of what they had done settling onto shoulders not quite strong enough to carry it easily. How many casualties? Nova asked quietly. From our operations. How many Vraxians died when those facilities failed? The intelligence officer checked his data pad. Best estimate is 47,000. Most in industrial accidents when containment failed. Some in the secondary explosions. A few thousand from life support failures on ships that lost power in deep space. We tried to minimize civilian casualties, focused on military infrastructure, but collateral damage was inevitable. Nova felt sick. 47,000. More than died at New Perth. They had become what they fought against. Killed civilians to achieve military objectives. Yes, they tried to minimize casualties. Yes, they targeted legitimate military infrastructure. But dead was dead. Those 47,000 would never go home. Never see their families again. Because human operators destroyed facilities they worked in. Because humanity decided survival required ruthlessness, Captain. One of her team members said, "They killed our people first. Started this war. We responded proportionally. Defended ourselves. You cannot carry guilt for that, cannot I?" Nova asked. "We are supposed to be better. That is the whole point. We learned from our bloody history. Built weapons we hoped never to use. Prepared for war while pursuing peace. But the moment violence started, we deployed weapons that killed tens of thousands. Used tactics that terrified everyone who saw them. Became exactly what we said we were not. Monsters. Just monsters who chose to be monsters for the right reasons." She stood, looked at her team. "We did what we had to. Saved human lives by taking Vraxian ones. But we do not get to pretend it was clean. Honorable, justified. We killed people to protect our own people. That is all. Nothing more noble than that. And we carry that weight because someone has to. Because the moment we stop feeling guilty about killing is the moment we become the empire. The tyrants. The ones who kill easily because life means nothing to them." The room fell silent. Every operator understanding the truth in her words. They had won. Saved humanity from conquest. But the cost was measured in lives taken. Families destroyed. People who died because humans decided their survival mattered more than Vraxian survival. It was the calculus of war, brutal, necessary, but never clean. Never something to celebrate without reservation. The Empress accepted humanity's terms 71 hours after receiving them.
1 hour early.
As if delaying would only make things worse, she appeared before the remains of the Galactic Council. Admitted her empire's crimes. Accepted responsibility for the attack on New Perth. Agreed to trials for those who ordered it. Including herself if necessary. The ancient empire that had ruled for 17,000 years submitted to judgment by species they had considered irrelevant. The other 3 species that had joined the coalition followed quickly. The Rethkin Confederacy, the Irani Collective, the Solari Federation. Each one accepting similar terms. Each one agreeing that the old system had failed. That something new was needed. Not because they believed it. Because humanity had proven they could destroy anyone who refused. Fear was a powerful motivator. Perhaps the most powerful. Ambassador Chen broadcast her final message regarding the war. She stood in the same conference room where she had watched the Empress surrender. Behind her, the flags of Earth and its colonies. Beside her, Admiral Webb and Dr. Tanaka. The 3 faces of humanity's response: diplomacy, military might, technological terror. Together they had won a war that should have destroyed humanity. Now they had to win the peace. "The fighting is over," Chen began. 4 empires have surrendered. Accepted terms. Agreed to accountability. Humanity has achieved what we set out to do. Defended our people. Punished those who attacked us. Forced recognition of our sovereignty and our right to exist without fear. But victory is not enough. Never enough. Because the question now is what comes next. What kind of galaxy do we build from the ashes of the old order? She gestured to the 2 men beside her. We 3 represent the reality of human nature. I am the diplomat who tried every peaceful option before accepting that war was necessary. Admiral Webb is the warrior who prepared for conflict while hoping it would never come. Dr. Tanaka is the scientist who built weapons he never wanted to use but knew might be essential for survival. Together we are what humanity is. Not just peaceful, not just violent, both, always both. The question is which side we choose to emphasize. She looked directly at the camera. We deployed weapons that terrified the galaxy. Revealed capabilities that shocked species who thought they knew us. Proved we are more dangerous than anyone imagined. But here is what we want you to understand. We built those weapons because we had to. Because our history taught us that the unprepared die. The weak are conquered. The naive are exploited. We refuse to be unprepared. Refuse to be weak. Refuse to be naive. That is what you saw. Humans refusing to be victims, Webb stepped forward. But we are also more than weapons. More than tactics and technology. We are the species that nearly destroyed itself a dozen times and chose not to. That looked at our capacity for violence and decided to be better. That built weapons we hope never to deploy. That prepared for war while actively pursuing peace. We did not want this conflict. We tried everything to avoid it. We only fought when left no other choice. When survival demanded it. That is humanity. Capable of terrible things but choosing not to do them unless absolutely necessary. Tanaka spoke last. His voice carried pain, regret. I designed weapons that should never exist. Things that violate every principle I believe in, every moral standard I try to uphold. I did it because someone had to. Because if we needed them and did not have them, our species would cease to exist. But I hate that they exist. Hate that we use them. Hate that other species will now try to copy them. Hate that we may have just triggered an arms race that ends with everyone having doomsday weapons. That is the cost of survival. Sometimes staying alive requires becoming something you despise. Doing things you can never forgive yourself for. Carrying guilt that never fades, he paused. But we carry that guilt because we must. Because someone has to remember the cost. Has to feel the weight. Has to ensure we never deploy these weapons casually. Never use them for conquest. Never become the monsters we can be if we forget why we built them. Humanity is dangerous, yes. But we are dangerous with restraint. With purpose. With the constant awareness that power without morality is tyranny. We refuse to be tyrants. Even when it would be easier. Even when it would serve our interests. We refuse. Chen took control again. So here is what we offer the galaxy. A new system. One with actual enforcement. Where law matters. Where strength does not determine right. Where younger species are not automatically subordinate to older ones. Where aggression is punished regardless of who commits it. And we offer to be guarantors. Not rulers. Not conquerors, guarantors. We will use our strength to protect the weak. Our technology to defend the defenseless. Our willingness to fight to ensure others do not have to. But we will not rule. Will not impose our will. Will not become the empire we just defeated. She spread her hands. Some of you will not trust this offer. Will think we are lying. Planning conquest. Using pretty words to hide ugly intentions. To those species we say watch us. Judge us by our actions. Give us the chance to prove we mean what we say. And if we fail, if we become tyrants, then unite against us. Use the weapons you develop to defend yourselves. Because we would rather be destroyed fighting tyranny than become tyrants ourselves. That is the lesson our history taught us. That is who we are. That is what we offer. The transmission ended. Reactions across the galaxy were mixed. Some species embraced the new vision, saw opportunity for a more just system. Others remained suspicious, fearful. Convinced humanity was just another empire seeking dominance through different means. But everyone agreed on one thing. The galaxy had changed. Fundamentally, permanently, the old order was dead. Something new was being born. And humanity stood at its center. Not as conquerors, but as the species willing to fight for a better way, to use their terrible strength in service of justice rather than domination. Whether they succeeded remained to be seen. Whether trust could be rebuilt after such violent demonstration of power was uncertain. Whether humanity could resist the temptation to rule when they had the capability to do so was an open question. But they were trying. Genuinely trying. And perhaps that was enough. Perhaps the effort mattered more than guaranteed success. Perhaps striving to be better was itself the victory. The real victory. Not defeating the Vraxians, but refusing to become the Vraxians. Refusing to let power corrupt purpose. Refusing to let strength erase morality. On Earth, in a quiet garden overlooking Geneva, Sarah Chen walked alone. The war was over. Terms agreed. New system being built. She should feel satisfaction, pride, relief. Instead, she felt exhausted, hollow. The weight of 47,000 Vraxian civilians dead from human actions. 40,000 humans dead from Vraxian actions. Hundreds of thousands more killed in fleet engagements. All that death. All that suffering. And for what? To prove humanity could fight? To force recognition of their sovereignty. To rebuild a political system that should never have needed rebuilding. She sat on a bench, looked up at the stars. Somewhere out there, species were debating whether to trust humanity's promises, whether to join the new federation or resist it, whether to see humans as saviors or threats. She did not know which they should choose. Did not know if humanity deserved trust after revealing such capacity for violence, such willingness to deploy terrible weapons, such readiness to kill when survival demanded it. But she knew one thing. Humanity would try, would strive to be worthy of the trust some species might offer, would work to prove their promises meant something, would carry the guilt of what they had done while building something better. Because that was what humans did. They survived their own worst impulses, learned from mistakes, built better systems after destroying flawed ones. It was not glorious, not heroic, just human, messy, imperfect, striving for better while carrying the weight of worse. Admiral Webb found her there an hour later, sat down without asking. They had fought together, won together. Now they had to figure out how to live with what victory required, how to carry the weight of command decisions that killed thousands, how to remember why they fought while never forgetting the cost of fighting. "Do you think it was worth it?" Webb asked quietly. "Everything we did? Everything we revealed? Everything we became?" Chen thought for a long moment. "I think we did what we had to. Defended our people. Survived when survival seemed impossible. But worth it? That depends on what we do next. On whether we use this power wisely, whether we resist corruption, whether we build something better or just become another empire with a different excuse for dominance. Ask me in 50 years, after we have had time to prove what we really are. Then maybe I can answer whether it was worth it." Webb nodded. 50 years. 50 years to prove we are not monsters, that we are monsters who learn to be better and meant it. That should be enough time to know. They sat in silence, watching the stars, carrying the weight of what they had done, what they had revealed, what they had become. The galaxy had learned what happened when humanity said, "Try me and see what happens," had learned that humans were dangerous, capable, willing to fight. Now came the harder lesson, the one that mattered more. Whether humans could be trusted with their own power, whether they would use it wisely, whether they would prove themselves worthy of the fear and respect they had earned. That lesson was just beginning, and the outcome remained uncertain, as it always would. Because humanity was capable of both great good and great evil, the choice between them was what defined them, was what made them human, and that choice never ended, never became easier, just more important with every passing day. 5 years after the war ended, the new Federation held its founding session. Not on a human world, not on any former Council species territory. Instead, they built a new station in neutral space, equidistant from the major powers, symbolically declaring that this organization belonged to everyone equally, that no species would hold inherent advantage, that the old hierarchies were dead, that something better could be built from their ashes. Ambassador Sarah Chen stood at the central podium, no longer representing just humanity. She had been elected Secretary General by a vote of 43 species. Some voted for her because they trusted her, others because they feared opposing humanity. She accepted both types of support, understanding that trust was earned through actions over time. That fear could be transformed into respect if used wisely. That leadership meant carrying burdens others would not. "We gather today not as conquerors and conquered," she began. Her voice carried through the massive chamber, reached representatives from 62 species, more than had ever cooperated before, not as victors and defeated, but as species who survived a terrible war and chose to build something better from the ruins. That choice defines us, not our past conflicts, not our old resentments. Our choice to try for better. She gestured to the chamber around them. This Federation has real power, real enforcement mechanisms. Species that commit aggression face consequences. Economic sanctions backed by military force if necessary. War crimes tribunals with actual authority. Protection for smaller species who cannot defend themselves alone. These are not empty promises, not polite words hiding political reality. This is law with teeth, justice with power behind it. A Vraxian representative stood, not the Empress. She had been tried, convicted, and exiled. This was one of the reformers who had seized power afterward. Secretary General, many species fear that this Federation is just another empire. Human empire wearing a different mask. Your species has overwhelming military advantage, controls the enforcement mechanisms, can veto any decision. How is this different from the old council? How do we know you will not abuse this power? Chen nodded, respected the question. You are right to fear, right to question. Humanity does have overwhelming power, but we also have something else. Memory. We remember what happens when strength replaces justice, when the powerful prey on the weak without consequence. We nearly destroyed ourselves learning that lesson. Now we apply it to the galaxy. Yes, we control enforcement, but enforcement is not governance. Each species governs itself, makes its own laws, conducts its own affairs. We only intervene when one species attacks another, when aggression threatens peace, when justice requires force behind it. She paused. And if we abuse that power? If humanity becomes what we fought against, then you do to us what we did to the old council. Unite, resist, fight back. We have shared defensive technologies with every member species, given you tools to protect yourselves. Not out of charity, out of necessity. Because the only way this Federation survives is if no one species, not even humanity, can dominate all others. We made ourselves vulnerable on purpose, to prove we mean what we say, to give you the means to check our power if we betray these principles. The chamber erupted in discussion, some species applauding the transparency, others still suspicious, but everyone engaged. Everyone participating. That was the difference. The old council had been 7 ancient species dictating terms to everyone else. This Federation was 62 species arguing, debating, building something together. Messy, loud, chaotic, but alive in a way the sterile council had never been. Admiral Marcus Webb watched from the observation deck. He had retired from active military command, now served as advisor to the Federation Security Council. His role was to ensure the military forces backing Federation law were used properly, proportionally, with restraint. It was harder than commanding fleets, required more judgment, more wisdom, more willingness to say no even when force would be easier. Do you think it will work? The question came from a Corthan elder, one of the species that had abstained during the war, had watched humanity prove their point without joining either side. This experiment in enforced justice, in trying to balance power with morality, Webb considered carefully. I think it has to work, because the alternative is worse. Either we try to build a system where law matters, where justice is enforced fairly, where strength serves peace rather than replacing it, or we accept that might makes right, that the strong will always prey on the weak. That civilization is a polite lie we tell ourselves while sharpening our knives. I refuse to accept that. Humanity refuses to accept that. So we will make this work, or die trying. The Corthan nodded slowly. You sound different than 5 years ago. Less certain of victory, more aware of cost. What changed? I learned that winning is not enough, Webb replied. That military victory means nothing if you lose yourself achieving it. We won the war, defeated 4 empires, forced the galaxy to acknowledge our strength, but we paid for that victory with blood and guilt, with weapons we can never forget, with knowledge of what we are capable of when pressed. That weight never leaves, never gets lighter. You just learn to carry it better. Learn to let it remind you why you fight, what you fight for, who you fight to protect. Lose that and victory becomes tyranny. I will not let humanity become tyrants, will not let us waste the sacrifices made to survive. So this Federation must work, must prove we fought for something more than just our own survival. Dr. Kenji Tanaka no longer worked on weapons. He led the Federation Science Council instead, coordinating research across dozens of species, sharing knowledge, breaking down the barriers that had kept scientific advancement isolated within individual civilizations. It was rewarding work, important work, but the guilt remained, the memory of what he had created, what had been deployed in humanity's name, what still existed in secure facilities locked away but never destroyed. Insurance against future threats. Terrible insurance that corroded his soul every time he thought about it. Dr. Tanaka, a young human scientist, approached him after a council session. I have been reviewing your early papers. Before the war, your theoretical work on quantum displacement fields. It is brilliant, revolutionary, but I cannot find any follow-up research. Why did you stop publishing in that field? Tanaka smiled sadly. Because that research led to weapons, to the Wraith ships, to technology that killed thousands. I published the theory because I thought it would advance science, help humanity explore. Instead, it became a tool for war, for death. That taught me a lesson about scientific responsibility, about understanding that knowledge has consequences, that sometimes the best contribution to science is knowing what not to pursue, what not to publish, what not to unleash on the universe. The young scientist frowned. But science should be free. Knowledge should be shared. Hiding research because it might be misused is admitting defeat, letting fear control progress. No, Tanaka replied gently. It is admitting reality. Understanding that scientists have responsibility for how their work is used. That we cannot just pursue knowledge for its own sake and ignore the consequences. I designed the Wraith ships because humanity needed them. Because survival required weapons our enemies could not counter. But I hate that they exist. Hate that they worked. Hate that other species are now trying to copy them. If I could erase that knowledge from the universe, I would. Even if it meant humanity lost our military advantage. Some things are not worth knowing. Some discoveries should never be made. Learning which is the real challenge. The real test of wisdom. The young scientist walked away unsatisfied. Tanaka understood. He had been that young once. Believed that knowledge was inherently good. That truth could never be wrong. That pursuing understanding was always justified. War had taught him differently. Had shown him that some knowledge came with costs too high to pay. That wisdom sometimes meant choosing ignorance. Choosing not to know rather than risk what knowing might enable. It was a hard lesson. One most scientists never learned until too late, if ever. Captain Alexandra Nova Reeves trained the next generation of Special Operations Forces. Her role was to teach them everything she knew, while ensuring they understood why that knowledge existed, why humans had developed such ruthless tactics, why they practiced asymmetric warfare to a degree that frightened even their allies. She wanted her students to be capable, but also thoughtful, able to fight without becoming defined by fighting, willing to kill without losing themselves to killing. The key to special operations, she told her class, is understanding that you are not soldiers. Soldiers fight battles, win ground, defeat enemies in direct combat. You are something else, something darker. You destroy infrastructure, assassinate leaders, sabotage critical systems. You win wars before battles happen, by making the enemy unable to fight effectively, by breaking their will along with their capabilities. It is brutal work. Necessary work. But ugly work. Never forget that. Never let yourself enjoy it. The day you start enjoying this kind of warfare is the day you become a monster. A useful monster, perhaps, but a monster nonetheless. A young operator raised his hand. Ma'am, during the war with the Vraxians, you destroyed facilities that resulted in civilian casualties. Collateral damage. How do you reconcile that with not becoming a monster, with maintaining your humanity while doing inhumane things? Nova met his eyes, saw genuine curiosity, not accusation. I do not reconcile it. I carry it. Every day, every night. The faces of those 47,000 Vraxians haunt me. I see them in my dreams. Wonder who they were, what lives they led, what families miss them. I carry that weight because someone has to. Because the alternative is pretending those deaths did not matter. We're just statistics, acceptable losses. I refuse to accept them. They were losses. Necessary perhaps, but never acceptable. Never justified beyond the bare minimum of survival. And carrying that guilt, feeling that pain, that is what keeps you human. What prevents you from becoming the monster you could easily become if you stopped caring. She stood, paced the classroom. Humanity won the war because we were willing to do terrible things, to become temporarily what we fought against. But temporarily is the key word. We returned to being civilized after the threat passed, chose restraint when domination was possible, offered mercy when vengeance would have felt better. That choice is what separates us from the empires we defeated. They were always brutal, always ruthless, never questioned whether might made right. We question constantly, doubt perpetually, carry guilt eternally, and that makes us better. Not stronger, not more powerful, just better, more human, more worthy of the survival we fought so hard to achieve. The class fell silent. Understanding the lesson was not about tactics or training. It was about identity, about maintaining humanity while doing inhumane things, about staying civilized while being capable of savagery, about the constant tension between what you could do and what you should do. That was the real skill. The essential capability, not the ability to kill efficiently, but the ability to kill when necessary and stop when it was not, to know the difference, to care about the difference, to let it matter. Across the galaxy, species were adjusting to the new order. Some embraced it. Smaller civilizations that had lived in fear of their larger neighbors found protection in Federation law, found their voices mattered, found that might did not automatically make right anymore. They flourished, grew, contributed to the broader civilization in ways the old system had never allowed. It was beautiful to watch, proof that the war had accomplished something worthwhile, that the blood spilled had purchased something better than just survival. Others resented the change. The former powers, the ancient empires that had ruled for millennia. They chafed under laws that restricted their freedom to dominate, hated being judged by standards they had not set, feared human power even as they acknowledged its restraint. Some of them plotted, schemed, looked for ways to restore the old order, to prove humanity's system would fail. That might would always triumph over right given enough time, given enough pressure. The Vraxian Empire, reduced to a fraction of its former territory, underwent the most dramatic transformation. The reformers who had seized power after the Empress's exile completely restructured their society, abolished the caste system, granted rights to worker drones, opened their government to democratic participation. It was revolutionary. Many Vraxians resisted, but many more embraced the change, discovered that equality did not mean weakness. That shared power created stability. That justice built loyalty better than fear ever could. Former Empress Zarkthus lived in exile on a remote world, comfortable, safe, but alone. Cut off from the empire she had ruled for 4 centuries. She spent her days writing, documenting the history of her species, analyzing where she had gone wrong, how she had misread humanity so completely, how arrogance had destroyed everything she had built. Her memoirs became required reading in the new Vraxian academies. A cautionary tale, a reminder that strength without wisdom was just violence waiting to be unleashed. That age did not guarantee understanding. That hubris was the deadliest weakness of all. "I should have listened," she wrote in her final chapter. "The humans warned me repeatedly. Try me and see what happens." Those words were not a threat. They were a plea. "Please do not force us to show you what we are capable of. Please do not make us deploy the weapons we built hoping never to use. Please do not mistake our patience for weakness, our restraint for inability." I ignored every warning. Believed my empire's age made us superior. Believed their youth made them inferior. I was catastrophically wrong. And 17,000 years of history ended because I could not imagine that the young species had learned something we ancient ones had forgotten. That survival teaches harder lessons than success. That those who nearly destroyed themselves and chose not to are more dangerous than those who never faced that choice. The humans were not pretending to be civilized. They were choosing civilization while capable of savagery. That choice is what made them stronger, what made them winners, what made me a failure. On Earth, in that same garden overlooking Geneva, Sarah Chen sat again, 5 years older, 5 years wearier, the weight of office aging her faster than time alone could account for, but also more hopeful than she had been in the immediate aftermath of war. The Federation was working. Not perfectly, never perfectly, but working. Law was being enforced, aggression punished, justice served. It was not the galaxy she had dreamed of when humanity first reached the stars, but it was better than the one they had found. Better than the old council's corruption, better than might makes right. Just better, measurably better. And that had to be enough. Webb found her there. Still her friend. Still her conscience. Still the voice that asked hard questions and demanded honest answers. "You are thinking about the cost," he said. "Not a question. An observation always," she replied. 87,000 dead. Human and non-human combined. Hundreds of thousands more injured. Economies disrupted. Families destroyed. All that suffering. And for what? A political system that might collapse the moment humans show weakness. The moment we cannot enforce our rules. Is that worth 87,000 lives? Webb sat beside her. "I cannot answer that. No one can. But I can tell you what I see. Smaller species no longer living in fear. Former empires learning to cooperate instead of dominate. Law meaning something again. Justice being served. A galaxy that is measurably better than it was 5 years ago. Is that worth the cost? Only those who died could truly answer. But we are alive. We have to make their deaths mean something. Have to build something worthy of that sacrifice. And we are trying. Genuinely trying. Maybe that is all we can do. Try, strive. Refuse to accept that their deaths were pointless. Refuse to waste what they bought with their lives. Do you ever regret it? Chen asked. Deploying the weapons? Revealing our capabilities? Starting down this path we cannot step back from? Every day, Webb admitted. But regret does not change anything. Does not bring back the dead. Does not erase the weapons from existence. Does not undo what we revealed about ourselves. All regret does is remind me why we fight, what we fight for, who we fight to protect. It keeps me honest. Keeps me from deploying force casually, from forgetting the weight of command decisions, from becoming the kind of leader who treats lives as statistics. So yes, I regret, but I also accept. Sometimes regret is the price of survival, of making hard choices with no good options, of doing what must be done even when it costs you pieces of your soul. They sat in comfortable silence. Two leaders who had guided humanity through its darkest hour, who had made choices that would haunt them forever, who carried weights that never got lighter, but who also saw what they had accomplished, what they had built, what they had proven, that humans could be trusted with power, could use strength in service of justice, could choose restraint when domination was possible, could be monsters when necessary, but return to being human when the crisis passed. That was the real victory. Not defeating the Varaxians, but proving humanity was worthy of survival, was worthy of the strength they possessed, was worthy of the trust others might offer. Will it last? Chen asked. This system we built, this federation, will it survive after we are gone? After the generation that remembers the war has passed? Will our successors maintain the principles, or will they drift toward tyranny? Use the power we established for their own benefit rather than galactic good? I do not know, Webb replied honestly. But that is true of every system humans have ever built, every government, every civilization. They last as long as people fight to maintain them, as long as principles matter more than power, as long as justice is valued above convenience. We cannot guarantee the future, can only build the best system we can and hope others maintain it. Trust that the lesson we taught, the one the galaxy learned when they pushed us too far, will be remembered, that no one will want to see what happens when they test humanity again. When they forget why we said, "Try me and see what happens," he stood, offered his hand, helped her to her feet. Come on. The Federation Council session starts in 2 hours. 43 species waiting to argue about resource allocation, trade disputes, border conflicts. All the normal chaos of civilization. It is boring, tedious, frustrating, and absolutely beautiful, because they are arguing instead of fighting, debating instead of killing, trying to solve problems through law instead of war. That is what we fought for. That chance. That opportunity. So let us go be bored together. Let tedious meetings and bureaucratic arguments be our victory celebration. Let peace be its own reward, Chen smiled. A real smile. The first in weeks. Boring sounds perfect. Tedious sounds wonderful. Let us go be administrators instead of warriors. Diplomats instead of soldiers. Let us prove that humans can be just as good at building as we are at destroying. Just as skilled at peace as we are at war. Just as capable of cooperation as we are of conflict. That would be the ultimate victory. Not just surviving, but thriving. Not just winning, but building. Not just being feared, but being trusted, even if we never quite believe we deserve that trust. Even if we always question whether we are worthy. That questioning, that doubt, that is what makes us human. What keeps us honest. What prevents us from becoming the monsters we know we could be. They walked together toward the Federation headquarters. Two humans who had changed the galaxy. Who had proven that youth did not mean weakness. That peace did not mean inability. That civilization was a choice, not a pretense. Behind them, the sun set over Geneva, casting long shadows across the gardens. In those shadows, if you looked carefully, you could see the ghosts. 87,000 of them. Human and alien, warrior and civilian, all the lives lost to prove a simple point, that humanity had learned from its bloody history. That when they said, "Try me and see what happens," they meant it. That the galaxy pushed them too far and discovered what happens when you make that mistake. What happens when you assume peace means weakness, when you think restraint means inability, when you forget that the quiet ones might just be choosing silence, choosing patience, choosing to give you chances to be better. The universe learned too late, but it learned. That was what mattered. That was what made the cost, however terrible, somehow worthwhile. The galaxy had changed, fundamentally, permanently, because one species refused to be victims, refused to accept that might made right, refused to surrender to injustice even when survival seemed impossible. They fought, they won, they built something better, and in doing so, they proved that civilization was not a lie, not a pretense, not a comfortable story told by the weak to the strong. Civilization was a choice, a difficult choice, a choice that required strength to maintain, but a choice worth making, worth fighting for, worth dying for, and absolutely worth living for, because a galaxy where law mattered, where justice existed, where strength served peace rather than replacing it, that galaxy was worth every sacrifice, every weapon deployed, every terrible choice made. It was worth it. Had to be worth it. Would be made worth it through the actions of those who survived, who carried the weight, who remembered the cost, who refused to waste what had been purchased with blood and tears and the loss of innocence. That was humanity's final lesson to the galaxy. Not that humans were dangerous, though they were. Not that humans were powerful, though they were. But that humans remembered, carried weight, learned from mistakes, and most importantly, chose to be better even when being worse would have been easier, chose civilization even when savagery was possible, chose justice even when vengeance called. That choice echoed across the stars, reminded every species that civilization was not given. It was chosen. Every day, every moment, every decision, and humanity chose it. Again and again, despite the cost, despite the difficulty, despite the constant temptation to let might replace right. They chose better, and in choosing they proved that better was possible. Not easy, not guaranteed, but possible, and possibility was enough, was everything. Was the reason they fought, the reason they sacrificed, the reason they endured. Because if better was possible, then fighting for it was not just justified, it was necessary. It was noble. It was the most human thing anyone could do. And humanity would continue doing it, for as long as they existed, for as long as the choice remained. For as long as even one human believed that civilization mattered, that justice was worth defending, that peace was worth fighting for. That was the real victory, the lasting victory, the victory that echoed through generations. The universe learned too late why humanity said, "Try me and see what happens." But they learned, and that lesson would never be forgotten, never be unlearned, never be dismissed as irrelevant. The galaxy was better for humanity's existence, better for their willingness to fight for principles, better for their refusal to accept that might made right, just better, and better was worth everything. That was humanity's final lesson to the galaxy. Not that humans were dangerous, though they were. Not that humans were powerful, though they were. But that humans remembered, carried weight, learned from mistakes, and most importantly, chose to be better even when being worse would have been easier, chose civilization even when savagery was possible, chose justice even when vengeance called. That choice echoed across the stars, reminded every species that civilization was not given. It was chosen. Every day, every moment, every decision, and humanity chose it. Again and again, despite the cost, despite the difficulty, despite the constant temptation to let might replace right. They chose better, and in choosing they proved that better was possible. Not easy, not guaranteed, but possible, and possibility was enough, was everything. Was the reason they fought, the reason they sacrificed, the reason they endured. Because if better was possible, then fighting for it was not just justified, it was necessary. It was noble. It was the most human thing anyone could do. And humanity would continue doing it, for as long as they existed, for as long as the choice remained. For as long as even one human believed that civilization mattered, that justice was worth defending, that peace was worth fighting for. That was the real victory, the lasting victory, the victory that echoed through generations. The universe learned too late why humanity said, "Try me and see what happens." But they learned, and that lesson would never be forgotten, never be unlearned, never be dismissed as irrelevant. The galaxy was better for humanity's existence, better for their willingness to fight for principles, better for their refusal to accept that might made right, just better, and better was worth everything.